Thank you. I wonder what was the most striking thing you saw today? Did you see anything today that you've never seen before? I walked down a street in Sheffield today and I saw a woman maybe in her 40s hugging a teddy bear. I don't think I've seen that before, you know. And we as filmmakers, we're looking to see what we haven't seen before. People on left and right, can you read the screen, or do I need to read it out to you? You can see it over there, yeah? Yeah. Good, thank you. You know what the book is, don't you? We're not all documentary filmmakers in the audience tonight. There are lots of us. But I think that the question that I'm going to ask this evening is, how do we look? Are we good lookers? Or are we rubbish lookers? I think sometimes we're a bit rubbish, and sometimes we're really good. I've seen 6 films at this festival, and all of them have been really good, and 2 of them have been exceptionally good. Here goes. You might recognize the next 3 images. One of the things I think we do as documentary filmmakers is we have to move people's eyes around our screens. And you know when you've got a cat and a cat follows something? And I think that's what happens. Obviously this is our screen here, and I think as filmmakers we need to do a bit of this. Do we get people to look up there? Or up there. The great filmmaker Sergei Eisenstein said, "This is the job. This is what we need to do." I know you can't see me, but I don't want to do that because there's trouble. But this is the job. We need to move our eyes, follow the spot. And sorry, there are people up there I didn't realize. But follow the spot. And Eisenstein, the great Soviet director, said, if you sit, because he studied theater, if you sit in an audience, you want people's eyes to go left, right, left, right. I think that's one of our jobs. Some of you will recognize this. Chantal Akerman, her film From the East, Dest, was on movement here. How do we do movement? How many of you have seen this film? I can see some hands, 1, 2, Timo up there, I can see a few, So this is, if we ask what is the greatest piece of movement in cinema, I would say this shot is. I don't have a clip of it here, it's a static shot, so I'm slightly invalidating my point, as you can see. However, this is a tracking shot that lasts 5.5 minutes. Chantal Akerman traveled through Germany, Poland, Russia, and she made a film traveling to the east. It's called From the East, but to the east. And this shot is one of the most beautiful things in cinema. I think we can learn a lot from it. And of course, you've noticed that there's a certain color in this image, the blue color. So one of the things that we as filmmakers have to do, I think, is, as well as everything else we have to think about, that's like moonlight coming in there, isn't it? And we have to think about blue. We have to think about colors. And what are the colors in our film? Are the colors just going to be natural colors? Or are we going to think, is our film going to have a color? I was in Stirling in Scotland a while ago, and I took this photograph. And look at the shadow. It's not grey. Shadows are not grey mostly, unless they're internal things. They're not grey. Shadows are coloured. They're usually blue. And who knew that shadows were blue? This man. Look at the colors there. Van Gogh. He got that, and so that kind of alertness, I think certainly in my work, I've tried to have that alertness to the color. Oh, Pirjo, Honkasalo. Any Finnish people here tonight? No, but lots of you will know her work. This is Chechnya. This is a little Islamic boy who, I think it's a goat, has just been blooded, and so the blood, the thing on his face is the blood of the goat. It's a brilliant film, but look what she does with the color. There's all that red stuff, and she and her cinematographer also make sure we get a little bit of that green, the kind of excitement of that. And the next one, I'm sure some of you recognized the music that was playing as you arrived, but if you didn't, here's another clue. Alfred Hitchcock's film Vertigo. And look what happens here. So she is turquoisey color. But look at the color of the shadows. There's no gray in those shadows. That is a kind of magenta color. And when you look at the color wheel, when you look at how color works, turquoise and magenta love each other. They have a desire for each other. They want to be in tandem. Hitchcock and his great cinematographer knew that, and I think, again, as filmmakers, we need to understand that. And this next image, look at that. Okay, this is a painting, isn't it? Except it's not a painting. It's a photograph from North Korea. Look, here's the great leader here. But look at those. Oh, I realize I've got a pointer. Have I got a pointer? Thank you, mate. And I just press this thing, don't I? Okay. So look at that. Whoa. Great. So look at that turquoise, and look at that turquoise, and then look at that lovely pink color, and then look at this thing. We're going to get on to talk about light, hopefully. But these, that's a documentary image. This is not it's a documentary image. So we're going to have some film clips, and the next film clip is, unfortunately, you're going to hear my voice in it, but it's a thing that I was trying to make about great documentary. And the next clip is by one of the greatest documentary filmmakers, Kaul. Still on color. There are lots of things about this, but just look at the color in this image, this scene.
Forward and a silhouette of a woman. Music sound. The young man is toes and hands.
Look at that.
Upwards, the young man, moves as if he'd been frozen before. Did Kino Visconti make a documentary in India? Is this it? No. The director here is Kaul. Subject is the life of Siddheshwari Devi, a classical Indian singer. Sensuality, framing.
Look at that. My God, look at that shot.
सुनो अर्जुन, एक सीधी और सादी कहानी है। एक पुराना खेल या कथा। ये घाट अर्जुन और घाट इंद्र के बंधन में रखे हैं।
Wow.
We soar around a Hindu temple. Past pigeons. Where are we going? On what are we traveling? A magic carpet. And then we float down to a mother and child. And now a big boat. And it flows through static men like Anthony Gormley's statues. Did ever a documentary look like this? And yet, you guessed it, John, the film is seldom mentioned on the list of greats.
So, frankly, I'd rather just sit and watch this film than listen to me. But isn't that so beautiful? And and why is this not incredibly famous film? Why is it not available on DVD? Anyway, what a great looker he was. From color to distance. When you read prison memoirs, what's the one thing that people in prison often talk about? The chink. Can they see a tree? Can they see a bit of horizon? When houses or apartments sell, often one of the key things is, what is the sightline? What can we see? And I think that's a big thing for us as filmmakers. Where is the horizon in our film? How far can we see? Very famous image, which I'm very nerdy. There are a couple of nerdy things coming up, and this is one of them. This is me recreating this image, but we're going to skip over that very quickly to Roy Andersson. So those of you who know his work will know what he does. So he shoots these films in a studio. All that bit is painted. So that's all. His studio is quite small. I've been in the studio; it's quite small. But what he knows is that the horizon plunge. There's something about it, a kind of spiritual thing or a kind of exciting thing that he really wants to get to. So this is what he does. Kamran Shirdel. No, I'll be talking maybe a few times about Iran tonight because Iran has done so much for documentary. This film, The Night It Rained, is about this boy who, it is said in Iran, stopped a major train crash. Any Iranians here? No, but anyway, 1967, great film. Why did we not see it? The reason I've got it here, we're talking about distance in our films. And again, you've got these plunging perspectives in this film. And look at this, look at the heart. I don't need to say anything about this image. Look how heartbreaking it is. You know what's happening here, the Berlin Wall's going up. And this is the last chance. These children won't remember this. Their relatives on the other side, but she will. Look at her, she's taking her shoes off, she's standing in a chair. She will remember this last glimpse, and he might, and that the kind of loss of the distant thing. We're going to talk later on about the on-scene focus. Again, a big thing for those of us filmmakers. I think focus is become a big thing in documentaries now. I saw a film last night called Hale County Morning and Evening. Did anybody see that? Yeah, and you notice the focus. I can't see where you are, but you notice how much the interest was in focus, really shallow focus. And then there's another film here called A Woman Captured. Did anybody see that? Yeah, and look at the focus, it's so shallow. I think that focus really is a big thing for us filmmakers. Look at that. The perceiving the adult, we know Ingmar Bergman this is. Look at that. Look at that bit as well. Leonardo da Vinci, obviously, but look at that bit there. What he calls sfumato, the kind of smoky, I think that means smoky. It's almost as if you had a fire going here and it has a smoke going up, so it makes it blurred. And we know, if you're really close, if you're in bed with the person that you live with and your head is so close to him or her, they're out of focus. You know that thing? And sometimes they look like they've got one big eye, like a cyclops, that one big eye thing, and it's, that thing, I think, yeah. And there's a kind of look of love, we as filmmakers need to ask this, are we interested in this ultra shallow focus, which is the kind of intimacy, it's the look of love. This man, Sokurov, I hope you've seen his films. If you haven't, please do. The genius of shallow focus. His film Mother and Son, it's so shallow. He would actually take a Chinese brush and try to draw on the lens to make the focus even shallower. And this is a tribute to one of the great filmmakers who died this week, Kira Muratova, Ukrainian, died at the age of 83. This is her film Brief Encounters. This is one of the main characters in the film. So she goes out of focus, a light lights on her eyes, and then we look at these two, and guess what? We can't tell from this brief moment, but see her, that's her as well. It's the same person. And Muratova plays brilliantly with the idea of that, that sort of heart-wrenching feel when the focus pulls. And I just wanted to pay tribute to her because it's sort of slightly disgraceful that she isn't better known. Okay. Looking and discovery. Can we discover things when we look? How about this young lad, Harold Whittles? Look at that. That's a startled look, isn't it? Anybody seen this picture before? Yeah, so you know the story behind it. So startled look, but then follow your eye down here. And this line goes down here, below the screen, down here. And he's got an audio device. And the story behind this image is, this is the first time this boy has ever heard anything in the world. And that's what the world has a sound. Isn't that beautiful? I know this is about looking, and so it's a bit rubbish to show a sound image, but we as filmmakers, I think, ideally, we're looking to capture that startled moment. Do I need to say anything about this? Planet of the Apes? Holy fuck. What if New York is no more? What if New York has come to an end? What happened to it? What happened to all the people in it? And we're in some future world where none of that exists anymore. And how is this relevant to us as filmmakers? Because obviously it's a big fiction film, but we are looking for that holy fuck, where, wow, that image tells us something we haven't otherwise seen. Interviewing, most of us do interviews. I'm going to speed up a little bit. Everybody know this film, Shirley, Clarke's film. So she gets this wonderful guy, Jason, portrait of Jason, and she takes him to her hotel room on a Saturday night at 9 p.m. and films him constantly until 9 a.m. the next morning, 12 hours. He gets drunker and drunker and more self-revelatory. You could say that there's an ethics about this. I think there is a real ethics about this. But if we're talking about what's the relationship between looking and interviews, this is one of the classic ones. And this one, Shoah, Claude Lanzmann, most of you have seen this. What's interesting? What can we learn about looking from Shoah? Well, here's the filmmaker, and here's this famous guy. We're in Poland here, and he does this famous thing when he was asked what happened to the Jews. And what's brilliant about Lanzmann's film, this is the translator, what's brilliant about Lanzmann's film is that he doesn't cut. He keeps us looking, so we hear his question in French or German, then she translates it into Polish, and he answers, and then back and back. He doesn't cut as if cutting itself is a crime. Cutting is a kind of removal of humanity. If you've made a film about the detestable, iniquitous aspect of the removal of humanity, then Lanzmann says, let's just keep looking. Talking group, I love this. We know talking heads. We interview people and we frame it like that. If we're a bit cool, we frame it a bit that. If we're very cool, we frame it a bit wider. But what if the interview is a talking group? What if she's interviewing and all these women and children are all answering? Then suddenly you've got an interaction. An interview isn't visually about one face in a space. It's about it's a network. I don't need to tell you what this is. Occasionally, I put up a name here if I thought I would forget what it was, but in this case, I don't. This is one of my favorite films. This is Madame Omboro, and she was a bar hostess, a really working-class woman in Tokyo, and Imamura, Shohei, a great filmmaker, thought, how do I interview this woman? How do I not get into the usual old thing about some guy interviewing somebody else? So instead of interviewing her, he just showed her images of recent decades in Japanese life and just let her respond. So it's a kind of non-verbal interview, a very visual, a very looking way at interviewing. And guess what? Because she's not educated and because she's not from the academy and because she's not, a sort of white male historian, she just skips over some of the, you could say, most important stuff, and her perspective is unique. You all know what this is, the fog of war, and this is the famous interrotron technique that Errol Morris used, where he rigged up a camera so the film for the person is looking straight into the camera. Most interviews before this were slightly off camera, but those of us who are doing these interviews, we have to think to ourselves, what if our character looks right into the lens? I would argue in some way that it's been done too much now. Nearly every film has, or a lot of films have those kind of things. But that was innovative to see that kind of thing. Which brings us to eyeline. Who's looking in our films and who are they looking at? This beautiful film, do you remember this one? Kim Longinotto's Dreamcatcher. This is this great woman, Brenda, former sex worker who's in Chicago, who's trying to get women out of the sex worker treadmill. But look at that eyeline. Longinotto is outside. She's portraying a world, a microcosm where people look at each other, try to encourage each other, try to engage with each other. Go from that. So that's observing eyelines. But is this observing eyelines? No. Ozu. Is she looking right at us, or is she looking slightly? I would argue she's looking slightly that side, like 5 degrees off my left shoulder. And then where did that come from? Look at that. Is he looking, this is of course a Russian icon, but is he looking right at us, this gentleman? No, he's looking slightly off that way. And the idea in religious art was that if you look right at the person, that's one thing, but if they look slightly off, they're looking at paradise or heaven or something really close by. He's not looking away over there and saying, you'll never get there to this infinite place. It's really close by, but it's just over your shoulder. Marina Abramovich, the artist, is present. She did a great artwork in New York in the Museum of Modern Art. Was it the Met or the Museum of Modern Art? Can anybody remember? Anyway, so she decided, I'm in New York City, in Manhattan. We sit on our subways and we read our books and we don't look at each other. So she sat down and said, okay, I will look at anybody who looks at me back. In the ancient times when human beings first evolved out of Africa, there were roughly 2 human beings per square mile. Can you guess how many human beings per square mile there are in Manhattan? 66,720. So that is a 33,000 times increase in the amount of opportunity to look into another human being's eyes, and yet we probably do it less. There's a ladybird flying up the screen there. Look at that. See that? And, so moving. She cried a lot, and I didn't sit and look at her, but we were in the building, and that sense of just looking at another human being. So, could we put the lights up, please? Charlotte? Could you look into the eyes of the person sitting right next to you for a moment, please? Like, right up, lights right up, please. like, do a proper look. Yes. Look. You two aren't looking? Okay, thank you for doing that. Thank you, Charlotte, up there. The gods. Was that scary? I mean, there's a lot of, but it would have been nicer if it was total silence and all scary and everything, but obviously it wasn't, so that didn't quite work. However, but you know what I mean? You know, when you stare into another human being's eyes, I've done a lot of interviews recently, and I make a point of looking into the eyes of the person that I'm being interviewed, and there's a startle effect. You know that Robert Frost poem, Two Look at Two? You know, where two human beings look at his deer or something, I can't remember. But I think that we as filmmakers need to be aware of that startle effect, that electricity, that bolt out of the blue that happens with eyeline. I might stop talking for a bit and just show you some beautiful images. Être et avoir, you know that beautiful film. I can hear some of you know this film. Mr. Lopez, a single French school, one teacher, and one of his nicest pupils, and this was one of those films about that kind of devotional thing, the look of love. The look of love. Andrew Cotting, you recognize this film, you know, Gallivant, this great British filmmaker. This is Granny, this is his daughter Eden, and they traveled around the entire coastline of mainland Britain. It was a lovely film, The Look of Love. The Look of Love, or is it? This is Samira Makhmalbaf's film, The Apple. These two girls were imprisoned by their father, not because for some horrible reason, because he said, I love them so much, I don't want to expose them to the world. The world is too scary for them. And so Samira Makhmalbaf thought, I'll make a film about this, about two girls who have been imprisoned by their father. Who should I cast? I know, I'll cast the two girls. So they played themselves, and it was wonderful. Imamura Shohei, we've already seen one of his films, the woman looking, the bar hostess looking at the screen. This is his film called A Man Vanishes. It's very much about looking in love. This woman's husband vanished. He disappeared, and she was distraught. And she contacted the police, and the police started to investigate. Then the filmmaker, Imamura Shohei, decided to follow her quest. Except, guess what happens? The look of love isn't constant. She sort of forgot about her husband and became more interested in the filmmaker, Imamura Shohei, and sort of fell in love with him. That transformative effect of The Look of Love, it's one of the great films about that. Do I need to say about this? Anything about this? Willy Brandt here. He's in the Warsaw Ghetto. He's the German chancellor by this point. He, was very anti-Nazi. He goes to the Warsaw Ghetto and falls to his knees. He said, I felt the weight of history, or I felt the weight of the dead behind me. He didn't plan to fall to his knees, but he thought in an act of humiliation, to represent the humiliation of the German state, he would fall to his knees. 48% of the population of Germany said this was wrong, it was too much, it was not necessary to apologize to Poland or to the Jews in such an abject way. 41% said yes, it was right, and 11% said they didn't know. Look at all these lookers here. And it became one of the great images of the century. this image. Maya Lin was, I think, 21. This is the Vietnam Memorial, War Memorial. Oh, sorry, Vietnam War Memorial. It's best seen, I think, in the snow like this. You can absolutely see that it's a wedge. It's buried in the earth, as if the trauma of Vietnam is buried in the earth, and so it becomes a wedge. Obviously, there are names of all the dead, the American dead, on this memorial. But she was a student when she made this. You know, there was a big international competition, and she was a student, and she came up with this thing which is about looking. It's about, we need to, all these consciousness, all these people who died, all these mental lives that died, that disappeared. She found a way, as almost an abstract way of saying, these people will not be forgotten. There's something so physical, so rock solid, like solid, that is the opposite of consciousness. And, well, politics. Okay, I don't need to say anything about this image. Look at this, 1659. In the era of Harvey Weinstein, this is really, you know, this is Timoclea, who was the ancient mythical character who was raped by this guy, who was I think a captain or something like that. Look at that. Why do we not know this image? Or maybe lots of you do, but it should be better known and it should be taught in art history, clearly. Ireland, Dublin. What do we say about this person? Probably a woman, probably sitting, it's obviously cold, it's winter. Is she Romanian? Is she's sitting there, look at that. And then look at these people. Who are we in this image? I have to say I'm probably those people, you know. I'm probably embarrassed. I might give her a few quid, but I'm walking by, you know, and where do we fit into this looking image? And then look at these. You know, these are sort of metaphorical brackets, aren't they, between their world and her world, you know, and what is it possible to bracket those two worlds, you know? This is the great Indian filmmaker Anand Patwardhan that I mentioned earlier, one of the great the great political lookers. And one time I met him here in Sheffield, and he said, "Let's go for like a chip sandwich or something," and that's what we did. And I thought, cool. Now, that beautiful image. Did many of you see the film last night? It was called Under the Wire, about Mary Colvin, and some of you see it, and I didn't see it. It was incredibly moving, and it was about Homs, wasn't it? Guess where this was found? Homs. How long ago was it found? 4,000 years ago. And look at the pain. Look at this tear. You know, you've got two circular tears here, and then this one beautiful. You know, the gravity's acting on this tear, but not on those two tears. 4,000 years ago. And that is so incredibly relevant. And now, sort of slight trigger warning coming up. This is a very horrible image. So here we are in Buchenwald, and these people are from Weimar, the bourgeoisie of Weimar, which is, those of you who have been, it's about 11 kilometers away from Buchenwald, where the atrocity happened, where all these people were killed. And of course, in the denazification process, these people were required to come and watch and look at the crime that was done in their name. And it's not surprising. Look at her. Not only is she turning her head away, but she's doing that. It's not surprising. I think I would do the same. He's turning his head away. Whatever she or he's doing, it's the same. Wouldn't you turn your head away? 11 kilometers from your own town, this happens. I'm going to skip this one thought. Sheffield. So here we have, you know, the old Sheffield, what's it called? The Sheffield estate. You know, this is where Mary Queen of Scots was imprisoned here. So this has you've got colonial, aristocratic architecture. Then you've got these houses here from a kind of, and over here as well, from a kind of Victorian idea that you have your own little house and your little back garden, and then you've got a private world. And then look at this big Park Hill. That's a different visual thinking. There's one visual thinking, which is the aristocrats run everything. This visual thinking, which is Victorian thinking, which is we only have our little private worlds and we keep ourselves to ourselves. And this kind of utopian thinking, which is, we have these big communal living spaces and all our children can play there and there and there. And it sort of worked and sort of didn't, and you could argue that all day. But in a place like Sheffield, we can see that visual thinking. Thinking. Farooq Farrokhzad, great Iranian director, poet, feminist. What sort of visual thinking is she doing? Hands. We're in a place where lots of people with leprosy live. Many of you will have seen this before. Tracking shot, right? We've seen his hands, first of all. His hands are damaged by his leprosy. Other types of hands. Other types of hands. Are hands inflictions, afflictions? Are they design elements, as we see in a moment? Or are they things that we pray with? Things that we filter the world through. Look at that. Farooq Farrokhzad. This is a weird one. I don't know if I'll do this very well. But sometimes, you're sitting, like I was sitting on the train on the way down here, and I realized I was looking at lots of things at once. So there's a painting. Oh, who's that? Okay, that's it. Oh, back one. Oh, it's not there. Okay, so we'll skip to this. This is a painting by a guy called Gentili de Bologna, and what we're supposed to be seeing here is the adoration of the Magi. Here's the Virgin Mary, Christ. The kings have come along. They're all worshipping. But down here are, other people, and this is all daytime up here. The worshipping's already happening, but you go down here, and it's nighttime. This is moonlight. This is a moonlit road. And these guys, these are the shepherds, and they're looking at each other. And even the horses are looking at each other. Look at all that eyeballing going on there. And look at all this eyeballing. And look at this eyeballing. It's all eyeballing, this picture, And on it goes. And he was a sort of genius at that. And in this picture, we've got loads of eyeballing. We've got present. We've discovered the Christ child, and we're paying worship. We're on our way to the Christ child, and we don't really care about it because we're having, we've got a traffic cone in our head here, and we've got a Scottish sporran here. So there are other things going on in this picture. And what does that remind us of? I think it reminds me of this Cubism, Georges Braque. And if I go, because I can, look, flick between the two. This is kind of Cubism, and I think those of us who are filmmakers have to think about that kind of Cubist idea in which we work, in that we can have more than one moment in our image. Visual obsession. Okay. Great German-American painter Lionel Feininger, who saw this church, Gelmoroda or something church, and then look, he painted it, and he painted it, and he painted it, and he drew it. Obsessed by an image, and I think sometimes some of our best filmmakers are obsessed by something, obsessed by an image. And of course, because I'm a nerdy guy, I went there and drew it. But also Vincent van Gogh. He was in this facility for his mental health in Saint-Paul-de-Vence, and he painted the field when it was raining, and he painted when it was sunny. Raining, sunny, raining, sunny. And there's something about that obsession, I think, that's really exciting. It excites me, at least, when I see films and filmmakers. I'm going to skip a little bit here. Microcosms, so many films I've seen here are set in one house, or set in one community, set in one environment. That idea of the microcosm is really central to what we do as documentary filmmakers. Saturated ray microcosm, you look into a little glass orb. Here's a microcosm. This is Galileo being a beautiful painting. We don't know who painted this thing. This is Galileo being accused by all the Catholic hierarchy. Blah, blah, blah. Look at that for a microcosm. Like this is a rock pool. And look here, somebody's just lifted the curtain and jumped off and done something else. But that's a proper microcosm. And when we think of some of the best films ever made, they are microcosms. There's another one, Electron Microscope. There's another one, Busby Berkeley. I forgot his name. Okay, so this is, I think, for me, the most important thing. Filmmaking, for me, is transformative. And this is Pablo Picasso you're about to see. You've probably seen this clip before, but this is really good. The audio's there, isn't it? Yes. Maybe go a little bit up, can we, if it's too quiet? Thank you. So what's he drawing? What's he drawing? We don't know yet, but he's drawing something, obviously. And then these stems come up and we think, look, he's doing leaves, so he's drawing flowers. And we as filmmakers, we start, in a way, we're drawing flowers, except what's happening here? What's that? What's that? And suddenly we realize once we see that bit, it's not flowers, it's a fish. And so suddenly our film is not about flowers, it's about a fish. So then we're happy because our film has transformed, which is lovely, it's got an organic life, etc. That's great. And so we're very satisfied filmmakers and we think, it'll get into the Sheffield Documentary Festival, etc. But is that the end of the story? You've guessed it, it's not quite. What's this? What's that up there? We don't know what's happening there. I'm suddenly confused. Oh no! Oh no! It's a chicken! Look, it's a chicken. So, our film was flowers. And then it was a fish, and then guess what? It turned out to be a chicken. I'm nearly done. The unseen. We think that when we're filmmakers, we think, what's the access? But the people who fund our film say, what's the unique footage? Have you got some footage of something that we haven't seen before? What if the opposite is good? What if what if we don't have something? Famously, Shoah. Claude Lanzmann, this guy, can't remember, Skulmoff or something, whatever his name was, he was the SS officer in Treblinka, and this was way ages and ages ago before there was hidden micro cameras, and so he set up a hidden camera to ask this guy to talk about the great unseen, which was one of the great unseens, which is about how the Treblinka massacre took place. Very disturbing. Could I ask how long have I got to go? What time are we on now? Another what? Oh, good. So the next one, I was going to skip the next one, but many of you will know this clip, but if we're talking about the unseen, sometimes, truths are so buried that they need to be excavated. You dig them out of the ground. Or another metaphor is the truths are so buried that they're like onions where you have to unpeel the layers. The next clip is from a film that hopefully a lot of you have seen called The Emperor's Naked Army Marches On. How many of you have seen it? A few. One, two, just a few. Okay, yeah, good up there, great. So it's about a guy called Mr. Okusai who fought in World War II, and he fought valiantly. But after World War II finished, he was in Japan. He's Japanese, as you can tell by his name. He found that some things still happened, and some terrible things still happened. And one of the things that happened was that the commanders in his regiment killed and ate some of his colleagues and friends. So, appalling situation. Mr. Okuzai goes and visits these commanders, and we're about to see a moment where he meets a gentleman who's getting on in years. He's not the healthiest, and Mr. Okuzai realizes that it's so important for the history of Japan that they know about this atrocity, that he's going to dispense with the niceties. This is one of the great unscenes, that there was cannibalism in Japan after World War II. He dispenses with the niceties, and he confronts this guy. How do we do it? Are we polite? Are we, deferential, or do we do this? So he wrestles him to the ground. If the truth matters so much, if it's so buried, particularly in quite a polite society like Japan, how do you get the truth out? Do you attack the person who has the truth? On a lighter note, well, anything would be lighter than that, obviously. But on a lighter note, we have Werner Herzog's film. Is it Werner? Yeah, White Diamond. Werner Herzog made this beautiful film, like White Diamond. Some of you will have seen it. And it's about this crazy guy, because all Werner Herzog films are about crazy people. And at one point in the film, we hear about this waterfall and what lies behind the waterfall. The local people say that there's something so magical, so beautiful behind this waterfall, that the birds fly in to see it. Is it an Aladdin's cave? Is there treasure there? Is there gold there? So Herzog gets a camera, and he and his cinematographer put the camera down. At one point, his cinematographer hangs on a rope and goes down and down and down. And then in his deadpan delivery, Werner Herzog says, "We filmed it, but it was so beautiful, we cannot show you it." The unseen. The previous unseen, I would argue the previous clip, you could argue, but I would say it's worth attacking this guy in order to kick the truth out of him. But, Werner Herzog saying that there are other types of truth, kind of mystical truth, that it's actually better not to see. It leaves our imagination. Talking of which, Another German film, Maximilian Schell, an actor. He made this film about Marlene Dietrich, a great movie star. I love this story. And he went to Dietrich. Dietrich was in her 80s at point. She was living in a posh apartment in Paris. And he said, will you interview me? Or no, he said, can I make a film about you? And she said, yes, of course you can. So he showed up with loads of the cameras and stuff. And she said, what's all that stuff? And he said, well, that's like the camera. And she said, no cameras. We're not doing cameras, because she didn't want to be filmed. Disaster. Those of us who are filmmakers or commissioning people are disaster. The main thing, the first interview with Dietrich in years, and we don't have it, except could that be the best thing that happened to the film? Thank you, Timo, by the way, for giving me this scene. So what did he do? He interviewed her, got all her stories in sound only, and then recreated her apartment in a studio, and then did tracking shots through the apartment. And her very absence made the film one of the best portrait films that I've seen. The fact that she wasn't there, the fact that we had to marry the sound and image, we had to imagine her as a kind of ghost in her own apartment, made it really work. So this is about the on-scene. What else have we on-scene? Not seen. Look at that. This is Pablo Picasso's painting Mother and Child, Mother and Child. And so he was, at this point, Picasso was painting and visiting in Paris a prison hospital for women who had some illness. And how does he decide to paint a woman and child? With their back turned. If this is a prison, her shadow might even be up the prison wall. But do we need to see her face? Do we need to see the child's face? Is that brown smudge enough? Surely the answer is yes. In China, there's a really interesting idea about this, about the on-scene. Let's not look at everything. This is called Yingbi. This is in the Forbidden City in China. And when you go there, there are in lots of places in traditional architecture in China, there are these things, which is basically a wall with a purposeless wall. There's no reason for this wall, except behind it, there's like you get into a house, and you think, why is that wall in the way? I'd rather just go straight through. And it's there for that very reason, to stop your eye just continually going. The Yingbi, this wall, makes you go that way and walk around there, and then walk there, and then behind the wall, to hide, to defer, to make sure you cannot see everything. Not all desire should be satisfied, and not all visual desire should be satisfied. Another unseen thing, I don't need to say what that is. Can we see the unconscious? We're nearly done, by the way, so don't worry. Can we see into the unconscious, or is that a mad idea? We all know what this is, Was this anything to do with the unconscious? Was there, those of us who have a certain age remember this gentleman, Darth Vader, and we're thinking there was something very potent, very powerful. He was obviously scary and he was horrible, but then when you compare him to something like this is I've forgotten the name of this. Who? Henry Moore sculpture, thank you. And look how similar these two things are. Henry Moore was very interested in Freud and the unconscious. And so this is like the outer shell of our experience, and this is the inner, this is our unconscious life. And suddenly you look at that, and then that, and you realize, yeah, Darth Vader was something about our nightmares, wasn't he? He was a way of seeing something that scares us inside. Lindsay Anderson. If we're asking how do filmmakers film the unconscious, Lindsay Anderson's film, O Dreamland, shot in Margate, I think, and a great film about the kind of surreal aspect of life. I probably don't need to tell you what this is. Jean Panlevé, getting to the end. How do we look at ourselves in films, or how do we look at ourselves more generally? How do we in this room look at ourselves? Look at the way Dorothea Tanning did. She took her eyes out of herself and held her eyes on it looks like a bottle opener. A corkscrew. She might have had a wee bottle of wine down here, but look at that. And then look at all this stuff. Look at that swirl. And how does her hair go into her nipple? And look at it. And look at all that. How did she look at herself? And could it be anything to do with this? Look at that. I mean, sorry to go back, but look at that. This is St. Cecilia from the 1600s, the patron saint of basically blindness and looking. And surely Dorothea Tanning had a bit of an idea that what she was doing going on there. I don't need to say what this is. I hope you've seen this film. Sarah Polley's great portrait of her own family and its complexity. Frida Kahlo. So this is a self-portrait, but a sort of national self-portrait. She was Mexican. Here's Mexico on this side, America on that side. At first thought you think, look, Mexican, ancient artifacts and beautiful vegetation. Look at all the smoke and smog, etc. of the US. That must be very anti-imperial, anti-US. Except, remember she was a communist. Remember she had just had a miscarriage in the Ford Clinic. She really was interested in modernist architecture, etc. So maybe this side is her favorite side, and maybe that side, look at that sun, look at the visual echo there. Boom, that's a bit like that. And did these things were these cannons that sent these things over there? So she's standing in the middle of a bifurcated world, and she sort of is saying, I am both. I am multitudes. I'm really nearly done, I promise. In fact, I'm going to, forgive me for this next one. A lot of this stuff that I've been talking about is in a book written by this guy here, but we're skipping over that. Maybe, so my finale here, or my conclusion is that all this stuff, I started by asking, is looking a kind of utopian thing? Is it a perfect thing? Or maybe the opposite is the case. Maybe we are in a time of looking overload. Is there too much to see? Are we being looked at really too much? Is this our modern condition? Is this our modern condition? If so, should we do this to looking? Should we forget about looking? Oh, that's weird. Should we plant a bomb under our looking and just, I don't know why I put a bomb on screen. That seems stupid because you all know what a bomb looks like. Is looking, are we sick of looking? As filmmakers, are we sick of looking? Has everything been seen? Has everything been done? Or, as I would suggest, is looking, when I mentioned the woman with the teddy bear, what about that? This is 3 colors blue. This is a woman who's had a major grief experience. Look at that. The screen is colored in blue. The blue is her grief. I had never seen that before. This was a new way of looking. This is the great film Leviathan from the Harvard people who make these, what do we call them, anthropological films. I had never seen this before. Remember when you first saw this? Remember? I mean, I had never seen that moment before. This is, the little Whittles boy startled by the world. This gentleman, of course, was startled in a slightly different way, shall we say. But, yeah. This is a film called Caniba, about a famous cannibal in Japan, made by the same people, the Harvard people, as before. The film is shot entirely, or almost entirely, on his face. I had never seen that before. Visual echoes, rhymes. Look at that. Ingrid Bergman. This is like a Rembrandt painting on the right, isn't it? Look at that. It's not all that far apart. She died not long after. This is Autumn Sonata of Bergman, and this is of Ingmar Bergman, and of course you all know what that is at Casablanca. Look at that. I mean, if we are tired of looking, if we think there's an overload, everybody's got a screen, everybody takes a selfie, look at that. That tells you, surely, that looking is a kind of utopia. I was in holiday recently in Skye, and the sky in Skye was very nice, so I did a little painting of it, and then I took a photograph of it at the exact same moment or a few minutes later, and look how completely different my eye was and the camera's eye was. If we're tired of looking, then surely we need to rethink our tiredness if we see this. Chernobyl. This is Chernobyl. This is a church in Chernobyl where we went recently. And what do they have? They still have religious icon paintings, except the worshippers have gas masks. If we're tired of looking, then surely our looking is rejuvenated. This is, the Breivik massacre where 77 people were murdered. What did the local population do? They made a field of flowers. Why? Because they knew that it would be beautiful to the eye. It would say something. Pakistan. Who are these women? Islamic women, you can tell by the way they dress. What are they doing? They're holding hands to protect Christians while they worship. To make them safe while they worship. If we're tired of looking, is that not one of the most beautiful things we've seen? If we're tired of looking, look at that. For a city, this is Astana. I've never been to Astana in Kazakhstan, but look at that. If we're tired of looking, look at this. 1000 BC, Mexico. Look at that eyeline. That could be today. That could be me looking at the woman with the teddy bear. Our looking lives have just begun. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name's Charlie. I'm a friend of the festival and a big fan of Mark's. We've got time for a short Q&A, so I'll kick things off. It's such a pleasure to look with you. And right from the off, thinking about the woman with the teddy bear, so many moments from your own films come to mind. Forgive me, too many late nights. Moments in your own films where you observe the world and you comment on moments that you catch. And it's something I've always wondered, watching those moments, and there's some beautiful ones in your new film about Orson Welles. I've always wondered whether you're doing that, when that looking is happening, whether that looking is happening while you're in the street with your camera, whether it's happening when you're looking back at the footage later, and how you feel that kind of operating the camera changes the way you look and changes your relationship with the world around you.
Yeah, it's a good question. I find when I'm nervous, which is quite a lot of the time, I can't look very well. To look really well, you have to switch off in some way. So the reason I bring a camera with me is it helps the switching off process. And so when I travel somewhere, if I'm feeling a bit stressed about something, I'll get my camera out, and suddenly it just becomes, what is the camera seeing? You sort of, what's the word? You outsource your looking to the machine. And so I love that moment. And then, we've talked about this before, but when you turn your camera on and you leave it running for a while, you're kind of in the zone. It's doing the looking for you. And so you're like, I feel like I'm the mum or the dad of the looker rather than the actual looker, and that's a very nice feeling. I feel, not everybody will agree, but I'm always looking for those opportunities to switch off.
I'll open it straight out because we've got a fairly limited amount of time. Anyone? Don't be shy. You've done a lot of looking. Time to do some talking. Over here.
You talked about your two
sorry.
really great films that you saw. I would like to know which ones.
The question is, I talked about two really great films that I saw, and you'd like to know which ones. Because I'm on the jury, I can't tell you. I'm really sorry. If you buy me a glass of wine afterwards in secret, I could tell you, but I cannot say, and so really sorry about that.
Anyone else? Straight across.
Thank you for that, as always, inspirational. I just wondered what you think about, I think quite often when we watch documentaries, we're encouraged to search for meaning rather than look and just experience that relationship with looking. And I wondered what you thought about the two, and if there's a distinction in your mind between the two.
Yeah, I think there is. Documentary is often seen as a more content-based film genre, and it often is. And, I've cried buckets in the last few days at what I've seen, But also, it's not only that, obviously, it's an art form in itself. And so some of the best things I've seen in the last few days have got this fascinating hand-holding combination of form and content, And I think it's really exciting when you feel the looker, but they're not imposing too much, And that's some kind of magic middle ground I think I really enjoy, you know, and so I think for me they are the best films that I see.
Anyone else? Daniel?
Hi. I was just wondering, with documentary, I think for me the beauty of documentary is that you don't really need a lot to be able to look. I love the fact it can be very low budget. Yeah, do you think we are all a bit consumed with the technology we're using to look now? Do you know, with all the different cameras and everything, do you think it's a bit overwhelming and we've forgotten how to look?
I don't. I think, you know, I can see what your point, you know, it's always been the case that you have to look through the equipment into the world. The equipment's there and it does a really good job and it helps you, but you have to look through it into the emotion, the poetics, the story, the politics, etc. I think that has changed, but I think for the better in a way, because the thing is much simpler than ever before, you know, and so it's more like, instead of being history painting, documentary is portrait painting, and we see more portrait films than ever before. We get into the nooks and crannies of people's lives more than ever before. So yeah, there are loads of screens, but actually filmmakers are better lookers now, I think, than ever before, simply because they're less distracted by the equipment.
I'm intrigued in terms of what drives you to relook. It feels like that's something that you do a lot. I mean, we had a few moments in the presentation where you showed an image and then you showed you there.
Yeah.
For those who haven't seen Mark's new film, The Eyes of Orson Welles, a huge amount of that is you visiting the places that he went, that he drew, that he painted. What drives you to do that? What makes you want to see yourself?
To feel alive, you know. I don't want to see myself in those places, but, you know, when you go somewhere, I just feel alive all the time when I'm looking. And I've, of course, like everybody in this room, I know Orson Welles' work and I've seen a lot of the stuff. But for me, he was always this kind of mythic figure, this distant person. But actually, if you go where somebody went and had pizza, or if you go and stay in see the hotel room, something, it's a bit sort of trivial in a way, but it becomes more, he becomes more physical. I've got a more physical sense of Orson Welles as a result of going to the places that he lived and worked than previously. And because, say for example, you go to somewhere where he filmed and you see how he shot it, and then you see the other ways of shooting that, you learn more about where he made choices about that he would put the camera usually down here and film that way. So you actually learn about camera placement as well, which is a different thing.
We've got time for a couple more.
Hi.
Why do you think bad sound can ruin a film worse than bad imagery?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, it's something to do with frequent sonic, you know, sound waves and electromagnetic waves and things like that. You know, our eyes are very tolerant. You know, we can tolerate a lot of darkness and a lot of light. That's why, you know, when you go into cinemas, most cinemas are red chairs because the light goes down and the redness disappears first. You know, so the light waves are so complicated. Sound waves are too, but they're more of an assault on your ear, which is your point. I guess I'm just repeating your point rather than answering it. Sorry about that.
Hey, how you doing?
Hi.
Hi, just quickly, what was the name of the Indian documentary filmmaker you showed the clip near the beginning?
He's called Mani Kaul, Kaul,
K-A.
and he's really wonderful.
At the back here. Oh, and then we'll go.
Yes. Oh yes.
He thought it was pretty good.
Pretty good, nice one, thank you. I'll put that on the poster, pretty good.
And I was hoping to see a still from Citizen Kane, which wasn't in the film. And I want to ask you a question. The question is, can you say what the first shot Orson Welles did in that film and when it was done?
I know that's a test question. I'm always rubbish at those. I'm the worst guy in a pub quiz, so I'm sure you know the answer, and I don't.
Yeah, well, this is why I'm asking.
Because you do know the answer.
You saw a woman with a teddy bear, and you're going to learn something now.
Thank you, sir. What a generous question.
What is it?
Because the first shot was done on Saturday, the 29th of June, 1940. Can you remember that?
I know.
Yeah.
This is straying into multiple question territory at this
it
point.
Because I was born the following day.
Okay.
But you didn't tell us what the question was, what this shot was.
It's the shot in the projection room.
Oh, yes, actually, I'm sorry to say, but I did know that. I just hadn't recalled it.
Well, it's easy to say that now.
So when I look at that, I think, yeah, that's what was happening when I was born. Orson Welles was starting making films.
I think there was one over here somewhere. You in the middle?
Hi.
Yeah, I just had a question about, we're all here for a documentary film festival, and you've given us an amazing talk about lots of still images. I wondered what you thought about the difference between when the image is moving as opposed to still.
David Hockney said that the incredible thing about a photograph is on the surface of the photograph, it's always the same time, which is a really interesting idea when you think about it. Like that moment is captured, unless it's very slow exposure. And so when I look at a still image, there's almost no time in the image, which is great. But that I showed a freeze frame of a blue shot from Chantal Akerman towards the beginning, and there's loads of time in that image. So I much prefer moving images than still images because the time dimension makes you hold your breath. Sometimes almost literally, you're sort of waiting for the shot to finish. And I think as a filmmaker, and many of us here, we are aware of that kind of breath holding thing. So it's a time issue for me.
Probably got time for just one more, if anyone has a burning question. Finally.
I thought it was really interesting what you were saying about colours and
Colour.
colours coming out in shadow and so on. Do you have a view on colorisation of film, of archived black and white film? Do you have any particular view you'd share?
Yes, I do. Unfortunately, I have a view on almost everything,
Great.
none of which are particularly valuable, and you will not be surprised that this one is particularly not valuable. I don't mind it. The purists, so shoot me. When you colorize a film, you don't destroy the original. It's still there. When you adapt a book into a movie, you don't destroy the book. It's still on the shelf. So I don't mind at all. As long as it's done inventively, there's some of these colorizing things which are so boring, but when something's colorized in an interesting way, I think it's quite fun.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for coming. First person to spot the woman with the teddy bear wins the prize. And a round of applause for Mark for this wonderful presentation.
Thank you, mate.